other people's views and what other people had to say about drainage impact fees in Livingston Parish, I did want to mention a couple of examples in my area, some things I'm going through where I think impact fees would be a tremendous help, right? I mean, I think we all understand that drainage impact fees have to be used for a specific purpose, drainage improvement outside the district, outside the development. I think it should be, very specific when the usage and the scope and everything. But example, I had a minor subdivision on Sam Herring Road out in North Albany, okay? And guys abiding by the rules, no concern there. But the water actually drains down the parish road to 43 and then drains a little ways north into a slough and then goes back to Tickfall River down the state highway, okay? And currently the man's out there and he's developing his property and everything's going well, but the water is accumulated down there where the development is, towards the end of Sam Herring Road, where it meets State Highway 43. And it is just, it's a massive pond, and it's 7 days after a rain. It's still out there, and it's a problem, okay? And so, of course, constituents call me concerned. I go out there and take a look at it, and the problem is that the road culvert, downstream of the development, right there near 43 on the parish road, is stopped up and collapsed, and the water won't flow through it, okay? And then, of course, if that was clear, the two state culverts are stopped up, okay? And the problem we have is the people that own that property on the corner there, in order to get those two culverts replaced, they would be responsible for purchasing that culvert, and then the parish would go in and put it in. And then on the state right away, they would have to purchase it and install it. And it's to my understanding, they're not, economically, they're not able to do that. And so, to me, that's a major problem with this development. This area is now holding water, and there's no funds to go in and fix the problem. I feel like if we had impact fees and that this developer could have put some money towards the impact fees, that we could have, as a gravity drainage district, went in and specifically applied those drainage impact fees to replacing those culverts, and this whole area could drain, and the developer and his property would be in good shape, and the people along the road and outside the development would be in good shape when it came to drainage, and it would all work very, very well. And so to me, that's a really good example of how drainage impact fees could, be utilized to improve drainage in Livingston Parish. And so I understand, that other funding is needed, and this is just a piece of the pie to go towards improving drainage. But to me, it's necessary, and it'd be a good thing for the people of Livingston Parish. And so I wanted to just talk about that. And then the other example I had was the one that was on the council meeting here a few meetings ago out there off of Henry White, where the guy was it was a minor subdivision. The guy was chopping up, taking 3 lots, turning them into 6, and the drainage downstream of that development was poor, right? Laterals were all stopped up, and a road culvert was undersized, and the people were really, really upset that the development was going to have a negative impact. I think in that situation, same case scenario, if drainage impact fees were to have been implemented, some money could have been collected, and we could have went in there and made some drainage improvements outside that development, and it would have been a win-win for all parties involved. And so I just kind of wanted to say that I do think that it would be a positive thing for Livingston Parish to implement drainage impact fees. I do understand it comes with a cost, but I do think in the end it's necessary, it should be implemented. And I'm here really just to listen to what other people have to say and work together as a team to try to put something good in place for improve the drainage systems and quality of life for people in Livingston Parish. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate it. Does anybody else want to speak on impact fees? Anybody, just come on up. Brad, you can come on up. State your name so they'll be on the record, address.
Brad Marcotte, 32440 Dunn Road, Denham Springs. All right, first thing can I address him real quick?
Sure.
Okay, you were talking about.
Well, you talk to us and he'll hear.
The changing out a culvert under a road, that technically, from what I read, wouldn't fall under this, correct?
I don't think it would.
Because that's a parish ditch, which gravity drainage only covers off the right of way, correct? So in your case there, that would not do any good for that development.
That's not my understanding, but we can talk more about that. To me, the drainage impact fees can be used to improve drainage outside.
Hey, Shane, he can't get it on tape.
With it.
Anyhow, so Brad, just go ahead and let's hear what you got on the impact fees.
Couple things. The impact fees, if y'all were to do them, that I had kind of wrote down that I think just from development to development is okay. I develop regular lots and develop townhomes and do simple re-subdividing as long as building. Okay, so when you're doing, say, a townhome development with, let's say, 50 lots, okay, you have 50 lots on 5 acres. So you're gonna pay whatever the assessed rate is, okay, which nothing on here clarifies to me, and I asked you this.
Yeah.
One of my questions is, what does a townhome fall under? Because we divide them as individual lots.
Yeah.
So that is a question of mine, along with what I'm getting at by this with, say, 60 lots on 6-7 acres. Okay, we have a drainage impact that's flowing into a half-acre maximum pond that's outfalling, versus if I'm doing a 60-acre development with half-acre lots, that's gonna affect a lot more downstream
Have
than that.
greater impact, right.
So you're gonna collect the same amount for this little bitty site as this big 40-acre tract.
Brad, multifamily development.
Yep.
When you do a townhome deal, you've got to follow a commercial guidelines on it instead of a subdivision.
Yeah, and why is that?
Well, because it's just different. Because of the way, I think because of the common walls and some other stuff.
Okay.
Because one entity owns the exterior and another entity, they all own the exterior together, is my understanding.
Yes.
Right, so basically, I think on a townhome, because the setbacks are somewhat different, because it falls under the commercial guidelines instead of a subdivision guidelines. And in here, we define, I think, under the impact, you'd pay $441 a unit on a multifamily deal is the way it's set up.
Okay, so that wouldn't fall under commercial.
No, it would be multifamily. I mean, it's.
Well, it depends on how planning
Well,
sees it.
I mean, obviously,
We need
the
to-
intent was that if it's multifamily, it's multifamily, and commercial's a different type deal. And we might need to work on the definition.
Well,
but I think
because multifamily could be, if I'm doing apartments,
Right, that's what
and
I
I
would.
got
But-
a 200 by 200 slab,
But ultimately, when you look at zoning and some of that stuff, when you do condominiums or whatever, they're gonna be considered multifamily in the zoning request. So they would
Okay.
be by definition multifamily.
so I guess my next thing is, say if you're dividing 5 acres up into 5 lots, okay, and you don't have any retention, you're not affecting anything any more than what it was already doing. Okay, like if I was, per se, to divide 3 lots upon each one of my kids, okay, you're gonna pay them impact fees up front, Or at the time of permitting?
Up front.
Yeah, when you break the lot up, right? When you
And-
divide
and
any
if-
lot.
And if the use of the lot is designated other than what it was originally, so for example, if you've got 3 acres and you can make it into 3 1-acre tracts, then you would pay on the 2 additional lots, you would pay the impact fee as a residential, whatever. If you do something other than residential, then at the time of permitting, you will be billed on the additional money, you won't pay another $1,000. I mean, let's say, for example, you do it and you're gonna, you technically were gonna build a house. So we charge you $1,000, or what, I think that's whatever's listed here,
11,
which
14.
is not necessarily the final deal, which we had talked about earlier. $1,114.
Right.
And then let's say that, because it's rural or whatever, you decide you want to put a Dollar General on it. Then Dollar General, when they pull the permit, is gonna take the credit of the $1,114 and pay the difference on what the calculated commercial impact is.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is if, I'm not worried about commercial, I'm worried about, say, giving it to my, or anybody's
Right.
Yeah, it would still be that
siblings.
fee.
Okay, you're gonna pay that, but you're not affecting that land at all at this moment.
Not until you build on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which could be 5 years,
Yeah,
could be
could
10
be.
years,
Could
could be
be.
20. So what is that money that I'm paying going to fix at that moment?
Well, so,
I mean-
it was talked about drainage in the area. And one of the things that the attorney told us is we need to designate, how the impact. So we're looking at a definition of how we define the area, whether it be the HUC 12 or HUC 9 or whatever. We're trying, watersheds are so big that ultimately if we say, the Amy River Basin watershed, it's just too big. So we're trying to get to a smaller area to define what the impact. So in essence, if you have an impact in, let's say, the HUC 12, whatever, then anywhere within that HUC 12, that money could
Can
be
be used
utilized.
for.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's, I mean, it could be improving things that not just we do, that everybody's watershed could be doing. So we're just footing the bill for everybody else. So why wouldn't this be something that would be ran through a tax, not an impact fee?
You mean, so it'd be recurring funds all the time?
Hey, whatever it
I think
takes.
if we don't do the recurring funds along with this fee, that it's not gonna help.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll help small amounts of things, but if we don't do the millage that stays with the lots for their lifetime, along with this impact fee, it's not gonna accomplish the greater good that you're trying to do to the whole entire area that development's built in.
Yeah.
That's my own opinion. Everybody else has got a different one, I would think.
So Brad, there was discussion, there were some ideas presented, at different times, we've been looking at creating individual taxing districts within subdivision developments. Let's say, for example, you're doing that condominium development, there's 60 condos, then you could, as the owner of the whole development, before it's sold, create a taxing district within there. And we could project improvements that need to be made, get a dollar amount, and then apply a millage. There was a question, Ascension basically says that if you don't create the taxing district, your subdivision is gonna remain private. It's not gonna come under, the auspices of the parish. So there was a comment made by someone, before that asked, if we created the taxing district, if we chose to create the taxing district, could we create that in lieu of impact fees? You know what I'm talking about? So
Yeah.
if we created recurring revenue, could we do that in lieu of impact fees? And that was one of the discussions that was possibly gonna be taken up tonight. But there's so many people that came to talk about whatever, we're just gonna
Yeah,
listen.
yeah, we'll
And
listen
I
tonight and
guess
then we'll
my
work on
last-
it some more, see what
I
we need to
guess my
do.
last question is, does this impact fee only cover from, say, where my water lets out of the development downstream, or do y'all come into the retention pond?
So what we're looking at, by definition, what it says is to improve drainage. So there is no, that's a discussion whether it be a roadside ditch or a lateral. In theory, gravity drainage districts only work in the laterals. However, if a lateral runs under a road, then it's technically either the state or the parish when it's on the road. However, there have been plenty of cooperative endeavor agreements where, the gravity drainage district might buy the culvert, the parish come in and change them, on a lateral, because everybody benefits. You follow what I'm talking about? So the issue, and so I guess the thing is to answer your question, sometimes your development impacts upstream drainage, and sometimes your development impacts downstream drainage. What we're trying to do is figure out how to get a legal description, something that exists legally that says, okay, if Brad's building it, 1,000 Florida Boulevard, what is the smallest legal description that we can find, to impact the drainage? And so that's how we got to the discussion of the Hucks, is the fact that that's what they do. They're part of a mapping system that kind of identifies streams and canals and ditches and whatever within a particular area. And so we're trying to go to the smallest condensed area within that. So, yeah, ideally we could say that it's, upstream of your development downstream, but we've got to come up with some legal idea, some legal determination. And so everything would be different, everybody would be different. If I'm building on Beaver Creek, or building on a lateral that right off of Beaver Creek that runs into it, then my impact area could possibly be bigger, than if you're building on something, some other ditch in a deal that's away from a lateral. I mean away from a major canal. So your impact might be only along that ditch, because by the time you get down there's been so much other water introduced. Your water's so insignificant, there is no impact. You follow what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I get that, but my question is, like, say in a townhome setting, say like the last ones I did, whenever I'm done with that development, I don't turn it over to y'all, okay? I turn it over to an HOA.
Right.
That HOA cuts and maintains that pond. And if I'm gonna pay money as an impact fee, is that gonna be, I'm turning that pond over to y'all?
No, because
Because at that point, y'all can't, I don't think legally, if I'm turning it over to them, if there's a blockage in that pond, okay, can you come in it?
Well, see, the blockage, depending on how your pond's designed, which is why we're talking about changing the way the ponds are designed. Ultimately, now, you could actually have a pond dug in a creek. You know what I'm talking about? So you bring other water into the pond, create a retention area, and then take water out. What we're talking about doing is creating ponds so that the only person impacted by that pond is that development. Because look, I got a subdivision in my district right now that at the time when a pond was dug, it was dug in such a manner, it has a creek that runs into it, runs through, and then runs out, and eventually makes way to the Avon River. Because of development upstream, that pond really needs to be lowered 2 feet. However, that pond it belongs to the HOA. So we're talking about how to reconfigure the design of retention ponds so that, number one, you don't create that problem in the future, that upstream development could impact how a retention pond works at a later date because you've introduced more water into it. You follow what I'm talking about? So to answer your question, as the ordinance is written right now, no. That we can't do anything in retention ponds because they are owned by somebody else. What we're talking about doing is working on the retention pond ordinance to create a change in design so that certain things can't happen where that would create additional impact on the retention pond from development upstream. Yeah. The second thing we're talking about is if the HOA doesn't have the ability, if there is a problem, and the pond needs some work, that the parish or somebody could, or the, entity, the gravity drainage district could go in and do the work, and then basically bill the people in the subdivision, for the work that needs to be done if the HOA doesn't have the ability to do it. I mean, there's a lot of
But
things.
that's not my problem as a developer. It's, at the end of the day, all of those people in that neighborhood pay taxes to gravity drainage now. And that's gonna end my.
But they
Well,
don't
only
pay
in-
property taxes.
Yeah, and
They
only
pay
about
sales
20%
taxes.
of the parish pays.
And so, the basic way gravity funded right now is for maintenance. It is basically, taxes were passed to create a maintenance type situation. The issues that we're finding is that there is a bigger impact than maintenance. We'll do a development, and everybody does their study, and it's all built according to standards, and when the real life application, when it really starts to rain and the water really starts to stack up, it's different. I mean, you follow what I'm saying? It's just different. I mean, because there's a lot of what if in drainage impact study. You know what I'm talking about? There
It's
are
a
calculations, I mean, some of it, and there might be some engineers that disagree with it, but some of it's a whack. Because basically you're applying a formula that's created that says this is a 25-year rain event. You know what I'm saying? And that what we want is no net additional outfall during that 25-year event than what existed beforehand. However, there's a lot of assumptions that get made during that period of time. And so consequently, sometimes what you find out is that, they've done this drainage impact study, and the net result means that when a 25-year rain event happens, the neighbor's not going to be any worse off than he was before till the rain from that 25-year hits, and all of a sudden the neighbor's like,
It never used to do this.
never used to do this.
Yeah.
So, so consequently, what we're finding is that after there are developments and everybody's done exactly what they're supposed to do, when the real world comes into play, it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And there's no funding for
To fix that issue.
repairs. There's funding for maintenance, but there's no funding to go fix those other issues.
No,
So that's why.
I'm not
but
fighting against the impact fee fully. I'm here to say there's a lot of gray
Oh, look,
in
and
that, a
that's
whole lot,
why.
and before it can be voted on,
Oh,
I think
for
it
sure.
needs to be revised a whole lot.
That's why
We
it's
agree.
deferred.
Yeah.
So, that's why you're here to talk about it.
Yeah,
I
we're
mean,
not gonna make any motion to send this to the council tonight, I can guarantee you that.
This thing's got needs so look, we sit here in a committee and hash out different things and talk about different deals. And our experience is somewhat limited. Some have more than others, but it's limited as to what happens in the real world. We've seen over the last 6 years, we've seen how it impacts. We've done some developments in the past and see what happens. And so consequently, nobody's coming to these committee meetings. All of a sudden we introduce an ordinance and look, there's 10 people out here that want to talk about. So in essence, when we introduced it and the phone started ringing, that's why it got deferred.
Yeah, so
2
you
weeks
guys
ago.
could come
I mean,
see us and
so
tell
you
us
can
your
come talk to
concerns.
us now, and we can look at, oh yeah, that makes sense that that's a gray area that doesn't necessarily.
And if you got a better way, we'll go with a better way. We know that there's a lack of funding for doing what needs to be done for the people of the parish.
Okay.
And we're not trying to shut down any kind of development. We need development. But we have to do it smartly, and we gotta do it different than we used to do it.
I just think on that is, you gotta be smart, but you keep making impact fees more, and you got sewer ones, you got
I know.
this one, now you're gonna put another one, then another one. At a certain point, it's gotta stop.
But Brad, so let's talk about this. I mean, let's talk about sewer impact fee.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens is you are paying, when you pay that sewer impact fee, you are paying what it costs to replace that space
Yep.
in the treatment plant. I mean, so in essence, the sewer district operates based on what it costs to operate the sewer district. We don't project, what we need to build in the future and put that in the bill. What we're doing is making those people that impact the need for additional space pay for that additional space. We could not do it that way. we could friggin' double the bills and have everybody pay for the additional space. You follow what I'm talking?
Yeah.
There's different ways to look at this thing. So what they chose to do back in the day was create an impact fee so that everybody that tied into the system, and that money goes to that money's put different than in operations.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't go into the operational budget of the sewer district. That money goes to a different place. And that money's there to build additional infrastructure when it is needed. And so, you know, it costs to create additional space, and so therefore, you know, we've got capacity A. And then, you know, as people develop, eventually A's capacity is gonna be full and we're gonna need B. So what we're doing is getting people to pay for B on the front end so that when it's needed, there's money there to build it. If we don't, then everybody is gonna pay for B. What we're doing now by impact fee is paying those people that create the need for B or paying for B. Does that making sense?
Yeah, oh, I get it.
And so that's the reason
But
that.
my B could be paying for Bobby's B down the road.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, and
that's
somebody
where-
else could pay for yours at some point in time. So the gravity drainage deal is a little different in the fact that, you know, it's not as cut and dry as sewer. You know, like
Yeah.
you build a house, you need 500 gallons of capacity a day. So we're charging you we're charging you what it costs us to build 500 gallons of capacity. The sewer impact fee is somewhat different in the fact that the immediate problem that you build might not be significant, but when 20 of y'all build the same thing, you know what I'm talking, then there's a significant impact down, and then we've got the money to fix it. It's kind of different. And so it's kind of hard, it's kind of harder to, I mean, the sewer thing's really easy to explain. You know what I'm
I
saying?
understand the theory behind it all. Okay, there's just a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of gray. And then my biggest is not even what I deal with, it's small individual lots that people are making.
And they may
That
not build
lot
for
is
forever.
not making a lick of difference to the drainage.
But in the long run, when that house is built on that lot, I mean, and I understand it's some point in time in the future. In the long run, when that house is built, that lot makes a more significant impact than your 60 townhomes do.
Yeah.
Because your 60 townhomes have been engineered with retention to in theory, have the water run off at the same level. There's nothing being done
No
on that
studies,
individual,
no
no
nothing.
study, nothing. They can stack dirt high as they want to, they can
just
pour as much concrete as they want to.
Pushes all the water off.
And so you can guarantee you that when that house is built and that thing is finished, the runoff's gonna be greater. It's not gonna be net zero. You could be net zero, there's no way that deal's net zero.
Yeah.
And so the impact of the subdivision or that resub of property is more impactful than yours.
Your townhome, yeah. Because it's engineered and set up to
Because it's
I just
retain.
don't see how you can charge somebody today for what may not happen for 10 years.
Well,
So I think it needs to be considered that the impact fees are paid upon permitting, not upon.
not on the division of
Map.
property.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll think about
All
that.
right, thank y'all.
Thank you, Barry, appreciate it. Anybody else want to speak on this? Moon? Look, he's like, wait, don't call me that.
And Billy couldn't be here, so he had a couple.
Oh, I see how that works.
Billy said,
Thank you, man. Appreciate
somebody else gonna take the hit on this deal.
We'll save that for Tracy.
Yeah. So I don't really have any specific issues other
Did you
than,
state your name for the?
okay, Raymond Mullins, 20955 Walker South Road, Denham Springs. Just on the end of, doing surveys and division of property, we hear a lot of this, people want to do 3 lots or maybe it's for their kids or just a financial burden or something like that. Mm-hmm. And now they're doing this to sell a little land to get some money to pay something and now they're having to pay $2,000-3,000 more dollars that they did before. Some of the other areas, and like Brad touched on too, is there's just a lot of gray areas. You know, we're hearing a lot of things, and we're sitting here going, okay, wondering what the answer is to that. But, and then when or if this goes into effect, is just having enough time to cover, if we had in our business taken a job and it's on the books to get done, and then this goes into effect before it gets done, and, you know, who's going to end up eating that bill? But I just wanted to give y'all that.
Yeah, give us a rundown of what you got.
Okay, well, you know, he just put some things in there that y'all done.
This is from Billy, in other words.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
basically. I mean, we kind of talked about it, but
Yeah, that's fine.
But and y'all spoke about a lot of this, but all right. So my main question, and y'all answered it, really was, you know, if you got two pieces of the property and you're just moving a property line between them, would you be affected? And
No, you're not correct. It's new lot. It's
Yeah.
new
Right.
lot. So to answer, like clarify how lots are created, will be
Yeah.
counted. So it's net number
Right.
of new lots.
So if you had 3 lots, you went to 4, you get charged for
you
one.
get charged for one lot.
Now, I kind of laugh about that because, you know, and this is a non-point, but putting up a sign for 4 lot division, you got 3 lots, you make 4, you got to put a sign up, and you're only creating 1 lot. So that's why I
I
was
get you.
worried
No,
about that.
look, I understand.
Yeah,
And-
all right, that's enough.
And look, you ought to put a sign up when you create one
Yeah, I
lot,
know.
but that's neither here nor
We've
there.
been
The
saying that
ordinance-
for
The
6
ordinance is
years.
written a different way, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, is there any special rules for if it is for family members? That would be one thing. If it's big raw land, 5 acres, you know, 10 acres, you know, things like that, where probably the drainage won't affect it that much, if any.
At that moment, but it will eventually.
Look, you and I both know. I mean, like when you talk about the minor, you asked about the minor resub thing. There's no engineering on that. You and I all
Oh,
know
I know.
that. So
I know.
so there is, every time you do that, somebody builds on it. There
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
plus result on that fall of water. And it don't matter if it's a half acre or 5 acres. There's still gonna be a plus somewhere at a
Yeah.
point in time.
But, you know, I mean, thinking back, we've lived in this parish a long time. I mean, it flooded 30 years ago without all these subdivisions.
Oh, well, I
so
understand.
what caused that, you know?
Well, I mean,
So,
look,
The
there's
flood that we had.
You're
in
never
16
gonna solve
We
the
need to
flood
throw
problem.
the 16 flood out,
The
because that
83
don't count, but
flood,
all
the
the rest of
16
it that
flood,
comes 8
that-
inches an hour, that's the one we got to try to
That's not
fix.
what this is about.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
this is about is that we talk about a 25-year rain event that happens once a year. Or a 100-year rain event that happens every other year.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And so we talk about a 10-year rain event that happens almost every dang time it rains.
every time
You know
it
what I'm
rains,
talking, based on the based on calculations.
I'm-
So in essence, you know, I think that's what it is. Look, I understand there's gonna be an impact. If I have 5 acres and I'm cutting it into 5 lots, then there's $4,400 and something dollars I'm gonna pay. But guess what? The guy next to me that does the same thing is gonna pay the same thing. The market is gonna collect that money. I mean, it's not, you might say it's costing you money, but the increased cost of doing business is passed on to the consumer every time.
Always.
And I read something the other day, somebody said every time you raise the cost of a house $1,000, you take 376 people out of the marketplace. You know, well, let me tell you what, the Biden administration took a ton of people out of the marketplace. So, through inflation, whatever, we cannot just sit back and let development continue to happen and never address the negative impact that it ultimately has. I mean,
I think we all agree we got to create some revenue, okay? I guess it's just, man, that's a lot of, it ain't like $300, it's $1,100.
Let's talk about the fee schedule.
Yeah,
This fee
let's do that.
schedule is straight out of the St. Tammany ordinance. And this was a fee schedule, this is a road and drainage deal. So we had already talked about the fact that this fee schedule, because it was introduced, was probably gonna be cut close to in half because we're not addressing roads with this thing. We're addressing drainage. I mean, that was one of the initial things that, but nobody came to the meeting, so nobody really knew. That was one of the deals that was probably the ordinance was already in place. We already had a deal. It was voted to introduce. But one of the discussions was that this ordinance, as it came out of St. Tammany, addressed two specific needs. And so the impact fee went to take care of two problems. So we already knew that the numbers in this thing were inflated, and in our discussion, there was a substitute, so to speak, payment of fee schedule that we had talked about at different times. And so that's kind of, so look,
And I think it needs to be double what that says.
well, but I mean.
Because that little bit of money ain't gonna fix all our drainage issues.
Well, it's not designed to fix all.
Well,
It's
and probably no amount of money will fix it.
designed.
You're right, no amount of money will fix it all, but if we don't start trying to fix it,
Yeah.
we gonna end up like Ascension.
I mean,
But-
we got,
we don't wanna
we
end
got
up
to
like
take
that.
steps, not leaps.
So what you're saying is that if and when this ordinance passed, there needs to be an implementation date at some point in time in the future. So here's the question. So there is discussion about us changing drainage, this ordinance about, maybe decreasing, actually telling you that you can't be net zero, you gotta be negative 25% outfall or negative 50% outfall. And we've talked about drainage retention pond, changes and some other things. And now we got all these developers bringing us all these, and y'all done it too. I mean, it's everybody. They bringing us, maps of the 4 through 12 filing, and it's drawn on a napkin, basically, and it's like, we're gonna submit this over grandfathered in, and we'll fix
we're
later
gonna
on how
fix that
bad
in
the
a few
design
minutes.
is. You know what I'm talking about? So my
Not
question
forced
is,
to do so, but yeah.
I mean, my question is, if we put a 90-day grace period in there, are we gonna have this huge
flood of-
influx of resubs all of a sudden that people might not necessarily do it, but all of a sudden, hell, I'm gonna save $4,000 if I do it now, and then if I've created the lots, then I can go fix the lines later. I mean, you understand? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, just with discussion about possible changes, what we're seeing coming into planning
Yeah.
is designs on stuff that there's no way it's gonna be
Won't be
built
built
like
for
that. It's
10
not gonna be
years.
built like that. You know what I'm
And
saying?
I wasn't even thinking subdivisions and but you got a point there, but I was thinking individuals.
Yeah,
It
but
was
I
like-
mean,
You
but
hadn't
the-
seen
but-
the signs going up,
but-
6 through 9 filings, 6 through 12 filings.
I mean,
You know?
so I mean,
They ain't got that designed yet.
the deal is, if we do that, then all of a sudden for the next 90 days, you're gonna be busy as all get out. And then you're gonna sit on your thumb for the next 9 months behind it because everybody's gonna have done it all at one point in time. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but that's the reality
Well,
of putting
yeah.
something in effect in the future, is that you're gonna get this mad rush to try to get under the cost,
Yeah, so
the cost
I-
savings.
Like
I'm
I
not
say,
for that
it's just, there's just a lot of gray areas.
Well, there is.
Oh,
And
but it-
reading that, there's a lot of, at the discretion of the planning director,
Well, and look.
We don't
can't
know who the
control it.
planning director's always
Well,
gonna be.
and look, I was looking, we're gonna talk about submittals in a little while, because of all these developments, all these huge maps we got coming in, and, if I don't change the number of lots, or what is a 5% variant? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reading on this at the discretion of, and we're gonna try to make some of this stuff more black and white, so there is no discretion. If you come and make this submittal and then you change the lot
At
number,
all.
you coming back. And then, so you either
And it'll
so
stop.
at some point in time, you're gonna say, okay, what's the cost of building it this way? With 60, I might have do it with 60-foot lots and I really want 45s. But if you come back 45s, am I still grandfathered in or not?
Nope.
I mean, you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's what we're gonna look at this submittal ordinance for the same basic reason, is that I don't know how you draw a ninth filing that might not be developed for 10 years when you don't know what the market's gonna look like in 10 years. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, think about what you were building 10 years ago and what you're building now. What are you gonna be building 10 years from now? Are you gonna want, or a lot's gonna be 35 foot wide? You know, because it costs so much more to develop them. We're gonna keep shrinking the lots and stacking the houses. I mean, what are we gonna do? So if somebody's brought all these filings to you, and it's something that there's no way they're gonna build that out in that period of time, there's gonna be a change.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just,
We talked about it the other night, and we're gonna get on that in a minute. Let's finish up on this impact fees. Anybody else? Yeah, come on up, bud.
I'm gonna, I guess, try to make some
State,
suggestions.
your name so they can get it in
Lee
there.
Foster, 21108 Robertson Road, Hammond, Louisiana.
All right,
I'm gonna try to make some suggestions for some of this gray area.
okay.
And, I mean, you can take it as it is, and I wanna kind of break it up. So effectively, we're talking about detention ponds.
Okay.
And I know, Mr. Gary said there was a talk about it needs to be tied to that one development, which, to me, if you're talking about drainage, you're talking about a region. It shouldn't be tied to that one development, because you can do a greater good by inline detention or looking at the thing as a whole. So when you limit to the parcel in which you're currently own or bought or building, you're not taking into consideration everything around it. So I think the outlook of a detention pond, and I've said it before, it's not getting implemented, the solution currently is privately maintained shore banks and outfalls. There's no legal reason why there can't be a public drainage servitude over the whole thing for regional type drainage and detention. It's a dotted line on a piece of paper that solves that. You may not be used today, but it gives you that legal authority into the future. And that's done plenty other places with great effect. It puts no responsibility financially on the parish, on the drainage district, but it gives you that avenue when you do have to do something legally, you can do it. Because I've been put in that situation as a developer going back where I don't have the legal responsibility because I'm not the HOA to go back in there. It's very simple. It's a very easy process. And can be done. If you start making detention ponds, looking at individual parcels, we're going to be talking about this in 5 years because it's going to have a negative effect. That's been done. The impact fees, I'm against impact fees because it's one-time money. It doesn't go far enough. But I think it's got to be broken down to subdivision without improvements. Like Mr. Gary said, like you build a house, it's going to have runoff, and you have subdivision with improvements. Subdivision with improvements, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineer, design, construction to facilitate a plan that may or may not work in the future, may have to be tweaked. But there needs to be consideration. One, I think it should be paid at time of permit. That's where the impact is. When the house is built and run off and the concrete's put there, that's when the impact is. It's not when the lots are built like 08, 09, they sat there for 12 years.
Right.
So time of permit is, in my opinion, the proper place to put them, and it solves it. That's where the impact is. The next thing is you have these subdivision with improvements. They have to be separated, non-improvements and improvements. With improvements, like with the sewer impact fee, if I make improvements to the current sewer system, I'm given a credit for whatever I did because it affected the greater good. I wasn't double taxed. You can do that in drainage. Effectively, I'm widening Coyo Creek on Buddy Ellis Road right now.
Right.
It was 12 foot when I started, it's 120 foot wide now. And if I have to pay an impact fee on that site, I wasn't gonna widen that creek. It's a trade-off. I mean, you talk about economics, you have to make it affordable, but you have to do it for the greater good. So there's gotta be a mechanism there for subdivision with improvement, with engineering, that if I do something outside the scope of what I need to do, if my pond says I need to be no net and I'm 40% larger than that and I affect, because there was a drainage problem upstream or downstream, and then I've got to double pay, I'm not going to be enticed to do that.
Okay.
I'm not going to pay twice. So I think that needs to be, and the sewer district does a great job at it. I mean, effectively, I upgrade pumps downstream that they don't have to cover. They didn't have in their funding, but it makes the whole system better. I get a credit for that.
right. And look, I don't disagree that look, we've had people build portable plants. I mean, the sewer district's grown because of the negotiation with sewer impact fees and giving people credit for spending money in other places. And trust me, I got no issue with that. I don't know, but I don't disagree with what you say on subdivision with improvement should be protected or should have more consideration than subdivision without improvements because of the engineering done.
Well, it's easier to quantify. If I have
Right.
the engineering and if I got to go clean 3,000 foot off-site of ditch and I decide to do that, and it helps the parish, helps surrounding neighbors, helps my development, but it's not required, we can quantify that because we have the engineering behind it, cubic yards, linear foot, whatever that may be.
So let me ask you a question. From a developer's point of view, when we did some modifications to the subdivision ordinance, and we went to the 25-year and then asked you to do a 100-year look upstream and downstream. And some people just went to a 100-year design so that they didn't have to look upstream and downstream. But you obviously are looking upstream and downstream for the benefit of your development and willing to spend. But sometimes I hear that the design stops at the end of the deal. You know what I'm talking about? They'll design for a 100-year and then not have to look upstream and downstream because there is no impact. If I design for a 100-year storm, then nothing I do on that development will impact upstream or downstream. Is the thought process. So I'm just wondering, or is that additional improvement something you come up with in the design process, or is that a negotiation with the sewer and the gravity drainage district in the past? How have y'all gotten to those situations?
Well, I look at drainage from a regional perspective.
Right.
I mean, so effectively, and I agree, there's some sites you can't do that. They're small, you do the 100-year design, and you met the requirements. That's why the rules are out there and we follow them. But if you have a bigger site and you can look at things to improve the whole area, a 100-year design may not be the best thing for that location. So when you pick a piece of land, you got to take the characteristics of that land, the wetlands, the topography, the location from the river, the streams, and what's best for it. When you get a canned set of rules that say you can only do this, that's when you get an inferior product. And that's what I think the impact fee is. It doesn't give any leeway. Like the $500, the $1,000, like I think that's a little much because one, I don't know what the goal is. Like sewer district can tell me right now they have 4,200 lots coming in this district, this capacity, and they're looking 2-3 years down the road. Well, for me to support this, I need a drainage district telling me that same thing because they're getting this money. It's public knowledge. It's not my responsibility to go through and say, hey, they're trying to raise $100,000.
What are you doing with it? Yeah.
Yeah, if you're trying to say, hey, I'm trying to raise $100,000 for this goal and this is the number of lots, well, that's business. That's how we operate. But just to say, hey, we want to fund this and we think it's good, I can't support that, I think, because we've tried that. We think it may do this or may do that. So if they're getting the funding, ultimately, that's where it's going through the parish, and it's assigned to a certain designation, either a taxing district on some of these bigger sites, and it can be a taxing district in a community for that hook, for that whole area,
Right.
upstream and downstream. But like, what's the goal of that? How are they going to spend it? Who's accountable for it? Because I don't want to put that money out there, and the residents of that community that are paying that, it's in the price of their house.
It's being used over there.
Yeah, don't see the benefit. Like St. Tammany, they will tell you they can use that money anywhere in the parish they can. So if I build something in Madisonville, they will use it in Slidell.
Right.
That has no effect on their development.
And so that's what
I had that same concern.
that's why we're trying to shrink it down. We just hadn't come to that.
No.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad y'all are here because we've been asking, hey, y'all come on.
So in talking about the taxing district situation, to create that, you really got to come up with some estimates and some projections at what the money's going to be utilized for to implement that. Is my understanding in some of the preliminary
Yeah,
discussions.
but I mean that's what's done by the HOAs for their budget for ours, for detention pond maintenance long-term that are private, like Red said, as far as maintaining
Right.
drain boxes and pipe. I mean, you have estimates for all that. So that's done, probably not on and I'm talking about subdivision with improvements.
Right.
Those with non-improvements is very hard. I mean, because
Yeah.
their impacts there, and there's no engineering behind, there's no study, there's anything. It's lines on paper. So I can't speak of that. But all the rest of them, I mean, effectively, linear footage, yardage of dirt, amount of silt buildup, I mean, all that can be calculated. I mean, even if you use averages per lot. But the effects downstream and upstream, I mean, I've done some developments, yeah, they didn't pencil out. We changed weirs, we changed pipe and made them work later. And I've done some developments, I know it's helped upstream and downstream.
Right.
So we can't say every development is a negative effect. It depends on its location and how it's applied. Just like anything, you got good engineers, you got marginal engineers, you got good developers, marginal developers. So it's a trade-off. But I think the opportunities to look at it regionally with detention need to be expanded when they pass this ordinance. Like, give us opportunities and make it flourish like the sewer district did. I mean, literally, you talk about 15 years ago, we didn't talk about a sewer district. It was too expensive. Everybody put it in packaged plants, and the sewer district realized that and came to the plate and had conversations and said, hey, what's a greater Livingston Parish in 15 years? And that's why it's done what it's done today. And we started having those conversations with Drainage District 1. to look at the overall. Like, instead of me putting a pond and saying 100-year, I may need to put a low levy on that pond and let the creek that's already over capacity infiltrate it and solve a regional problem, not a subdivision.
We tried some of that, the Gravity One stuff, and it, got shot down. And they had some really good ideas on ways to not eliminate drainage issues, but to keep them down. And we're gonna keep working on
But
that.
he's talking about in some of the developments, they've done some stuff now.
Yeah, now, and you've,
Yeah.
said, can you do this, and it will help that, or you might even bring it to the table.
Well, and look, there's no doubt that if we can draw the line on a privately owned, held deal and be able to have some control over the water level or whatever, then if that can legally be done, then yeah. Look, I have my issue with is in-stream retention is that I don't disagree with what you said if you have some control. The issue is that as it exists right now, as development happens upstream, what was designed 20 years ago isn't working, or 25 years ago isn't working right now, and needs to be modified. But because of the way the ordinance is written, the parish has no ability to go in there, or the gravity drainage district, and do any modifications. So there's negative. What was a positive back 25 years ago is now a negative today. But if you can draw that dotted line around it, like you talked about, and then if you can lower that water level a couple feet, which is really what probably needs to happen, then you've solved the problem.
Yeah.
And then the last comment on, like, when is it implemented? So if it's drainage, like you're talking about all these maps coming in, they're lined on a piece of paper too, but it's gotta have a date, because I've got a plat that's getting filed this week. It's been in the works for 3-4 years, like, I didn't plan for that. But if we're talking about drainage impact study, wouldn't the approved drainage impact study be the cutoff for a subdivision with improvement?
Yeah, that would probably work.
I think
On a subdivision with improvements, once the drainage impact study was accepted.
Yeah, once it's
Then
approved
that
and
would be
accepted,
that would
I've
be the
mitigated all
cutoff
those
on it.
responsibilities as a developer and met the ordinance. So to me, that site would be
Yeah,
exempt from it,
that's
because.
probably the right way to approach that. See, we all gonna learn a little something.
But that's, I think, my 4 or 5 things.
I appreciate it. We really do.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Shane?
Just real quick, when I appreciate everybody's comments, man. It's been a lot of good thoughts to help clarify some of this gray area. I just wanted to say, can we identify specifically what the gray area is? My thought, there's not a ton of gray area, that there is some, and we could clearly identify it, develop a timeline to address that so that we can bring this back up and introduce it, as a council. The two that come to my mind that we discussed tonight, one is the impact fee and how much it should be. And I think we talked about, it's a copy out of St. Tammany's, and I think originally we did talk about it being for roads and drainage impact fee, but I thought we went back and did some more research and clarified that this was specifically their drainage impact fee cost. Okay. So I think we need to address that, and if that's
then that would be the
our
correct
future
number.
game plan
Right.
that we're going to go with, then clarify that. The other thing is, I think the other gray area that we really need to clarify is what specifically the money can be used for and where it can be used. And I think if we address those, that a lot of the gray area goes away.
I think
Maybe
you're
I'm wrong,
correct,
but
Shane.
that's just what I'm thinking based off of what I'm hearing. I really like the idea the gentleman had of crediting the developer if he goes above and beyond to fund capital improvement projects outside the development, so that the development doesn't have such a negative impact on the drainage system outside the development. That's really a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I
And
got
to
no
me,
issue with that either.
to me, that's what the drainage impact fee is for. So if you're willing to do that, then you should get a credit on those drainage impact fees. And if you're not willing to do that as a developer, and there's many, many, many developers that don't spend money outside the development, to improve the drainage system outside the development, then that's what the drainage impact fees would go for, to the gravity drainage district to make those improvements. So
Well, if you remember
Really
when we
appreciate it, Russ.
changed the building code way back to the 25-year and the 100-year look,
Yeah,
I know Gary and I both thought that they looked further up and downstream, and whenever we talked to Morgan, and she goes, no, it's like right there at the
Right.
edge of that didn't do any good, because
Right.
that's when they changed it to just the 100-year and just putting it in for a 100-year and not have to do any of it.
yeah, but I would be in favor of putting something in the ordinance to, I don't know
But we'll talk
exactly,
about
but
it
that
again.
would
I
be a
guess
good thing.
Tracy probably set another meeting for the Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, I would think, not next Tuesday.
To clarify, he's right, that, those numbers are for drainage impact fees.
Only? Okay.
The road impact fees.
So the $1,114 is what they're charging just for
For
drainage?
drainage.
Okay. Mr. Jim, you got some comments
Yes, sir.
or questions?
Jim Chapman, 26172 Vincent Drive in Denham Springs. It's more of just comments. I'm kind of opposite. I support an impact fee. I think the issue with Livingston Parish is if you lived here a long time like we have, there's definitely a drainage problem here. Certainly developing is not the only cause, but it's probably the largest cause. Somebody had brought up earlier about a millage, and rather than an impact fee. I think the problem with that is getting people to agree to it. It requires a vote, and a lot of people see millage on a ballot, they vote it down without even reading it.
Right.
So that becomes an issue. Now, what a drainage fee, while it will not completely fix the problem or pay for the problem, if you do it in combination with a lower millage, it's more likely to pass.
That's what I'm thinking.
It may cut it in half, what you would need out of a millage. All of that being said, none of us want to have to pay any more for that. Mr. Bryant had brought up earlier that, if a developer pays that fee and then someone else is benefiting from it, maybe out of his area, it didn't seem fair or right. Of course, a millage is the same way. I've lived in the same house 25 years, haven't developed anything. A millage, in and of itself, I'm paying for,
Somebody
development
else's
I'm not
fix.
even doing.
That's right.
I don't mind doing that. I love this parish. And if it'll fix the issues, I'm for it. I think something that would benefit everybody is if maybe the council looked at an average over the last several years of developing to see how much money an impact fee would bring in, and then figure out how much of a millage they would have to tack on top of that. So, in the end, the homeowner, whoever buys that property, is going to end up paying for it. It's like anything else; that gets passed on, and
Yeah, whether it's impact fee or the millage,
Yeah,
either
I
one,
mean,
they're gonna pay
it's-
for it.
they're
Yeah,
going to raise the price when
Yeah,
they
correct.
sell it. So in the end, we're all going to end up paying for it eventually when you buy some. So that's just my thoughts. on
Okay,
some
well, I
notes I've
appreciate
taken.
those.
Thank you.
Anybody else got anything on the impact fees? All right, well, we're gonna move to the, presentation by Mr. Gerald Burns from the Master Plan Review Committee.
Thank you very much. My name is Gerald Burns. I'm the chairman of the Master Plan Review Committee. About 2 months ago, our committee, 3 members, and Senator Rogers Pope and some others met with Secretary of DOTD, Mr. Sean Wilson. And a very good meeting. And we were asking him to find state and federal funds to widen Florida Boulevard from Denham Springs to Walker, about 6 miles from Hatchell Lane, just past the landfill. And in the meeting, towards the end of the meeting, he started talking about, he used the word of fiasco in St. Tammany Parish in Mandeville and Covington area, where there was too many houses built close to the highway and commercial, and the state had to buy houses and commercial developments. Also, he complained about too many driveways coming out on the state highways, and he thought that maybe the parish can take, if you have a commercial development side by side, that you can make a common driveway. And you'll see that in Juban Crossing where, Charlie Castle Road, you got, Starbucks, you got Burger King, and now the Firestone, and they got one common driveway. And I noticed today at Firestone, they had, their driveway extending to the left to another commercial, so that's what he's talking about. But he was talking about Florida Boulevard. The state don't want to buy any more houses, you know, and actually, we were looking at buying, the state widening from Hatchell Lane to Juban, which is, I think their feasibility studies come in at 14.8 million. That's the latest feasibility study. But right across the street on the north side of where I think it's Gator Millworks, the big blue building, directly across you have Tranquility Lakes at Juban Crossing. I stopped and looked at those two houses on both sides of that road, are approximately 10 foot from DOTD right away. So if DOTD is going to widen that road, there's a 100-foot servitude there now, but if they're going to widen it, they're going to take those two houses, and they're, you know, approximately $275,000 a house, so that's $500,000 the taxpayer is going to have to pay. So he just asked us, Livingston Parish, to come up with something, and Senator Pope agreed. And our group is suggesting that we rewrite the ordinances to side of houses. Right now it's 5 foot. So technically they could have built closer to the highway, the DOT right away than 10 foot. So we're proposing that you go at least 30. So if DOTD buys, you know, takes 20 feet, you're not gonna take the houses, okay?
Right.
That's,
They complain about paying an extra $1,000 a lot in impact fee. We're gonna cut a whole lot out of a subdivision?
You're gonna cut two.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So we just had some developers in here, and we were talking about impact fees, and we're talking about $1,000 a lot that's gonna be passed on to consumer. And a 30-foot setback from a DOT right-of-way, basically gonna take, as an example, the lakes at Juban, that's that
That's
one.
what he's talking about.
That's that one, that's
On
one street.
190. Yeah, one
One
street.
street goes in, so you're gonna lose 2 commercial lots. I mean, 2 residential lots in that deal, right?
Well, I'm trying to explain right there at Tranquility Lakes, you have 2 residential lots. I'm using this as an analogy, okay? What happens if the state wants to widen the state highway? You got to buy those 2 houses. So, this is what Secretary Wilson is advising, to have some setbacks. And I had some extensive talks with his assistant in the meeting, Ms. Connie Porter, and she kind of reiterated what he was saying. So we're asking, the ordinance committee to come up with an ordinance to have a side setback of 30 feet instead of 5.
Is that
Only on state and federal highways.
So you want a 30-foot setback or
Side.
front?
From the edge
Side.
of DOT. So, well,
The
it could be
side.
front or
Again, I
side.
mean, what about front? I mean, what if?
Well, I'm gonna get to that. The front right now is 25 feet. And so we would ask you to add 30 feet to that. So front on residential now, we're looking at 55 feet. Instead of 25, you're looking at 55 feet to the front.
So you're, okay, so you want us to add 25 feet to the side? You want us to go from 5 to
25
30?
feet to the side.
And you want us to add 30 feet to the front or 25 to the front?
Well, it's 25 now, so you add 30, that'd be 55 feet.
Okay.
Now, we're only talking about federal and state highways, okay? Not talking about local highways.
Have you checked, normally you check all this, what are the rest of the parishes doing along these state highways? Do they have the same requirements that we're looking at
I don't
doing?
know,
You know,
Mr. King, I'm just telling you what John Wilson said, he used.
is
the
our
word
issue
fiasco.
right now. Okay.
I know they had a problem in St. Tammany Parish in Mandeville, Covington area, and
Can
he
you-
asked us
Right.
Livingston Parish government
do that.
to do something about that, prevent people from building next to the
Okay.
servitude.
Ms. Lauren, can you check on that to see if they changed their ordinance after that happened in St. Tammany, and if any other parishes maybe, around our area has that far of a setback? Because that seems a little extreme, but it accomplishes a lot of goals. I get it.
Well, I'm just telling you that here we are, we're gonna have to buy 2 houses if the state widens Florida Boulevard
Right.
beyond 100 feet. Now, they did say that they might be able to widen it within 100 feet. And there's 100 feet there, because I measured it from pylon to pylon.
Well, if that's the case, we don't want to make it 160 feet or more.
We don't
if it's
want
not
to,
necessary.
but they might have to. If
Yeah,
they
well, I
use-
understand if you
if
had
they-
to, but-
If they're gonna do subsurface drainage.
Then you gotta have
Then
a-
they can do
right.
it narrow. I thought, just like on Juba, they took 30 feet on both sides. They had 80, they took 30 more, that's 140. Okay, but they done subsurface drainage, but not the way,
I know, it's
I mean,
still
like you see
outside.
in 73 in Ascension Parish. That's the way it should be done, like a city street, but
And
they
through
didn't do
such-
that on Juba.
It's been taken forever.
So, I was under the impression that if you done subsurface drainage, that you could do it in less right of way, and they said no, it's just the opposite. If you do subsurface drainage, you have less right, you can use less right of way. In 100 feet, Mr. Eric Calaboti, his deputy was there, and he said he thinks they can do it in 100 feet, but maybe not. But
Well,
if
we'll
they take-
definitely look at
If they take
that.
10 foot, they gotta buy 2 houses, you
Right.
say.
So what else would you, is that all that he
Well,
recommended on
that's on
that?
residential. Now, commercial, I would ask you, to do 55 feet on commercial, the buildings that front.
Right.
State and federal highways.
And they're
okay?
gonna usually do that anyhow, but if we
55
put it in
feet.
the ordinance, yeah.
I don't know what it is on commercial. I don't see anything in the ordinance that regulates footage on
They could build it
highway.
right up to the
I don't
line.
think there is any determination or any figures there on commercial. If a commercial fronts a highway, then naturally the developer will want more parking.
Right.
If it's the building that goes side, then the parking is to the back and to the side.
They can build it right up to the
But
line.
you still need 30 feet.
Okay, okay.
On commercial.
You wrote that, he's
Now,
got
on
that
the,
down.
the driveways, I don't know, I can talk further with Ms. Connie Porter on that to see whether there's a state regulation now, or was done by the
Yeah,
developer?
please, check that out.
I don't know.
Yeah, check that out for us,
I'm
and then
gonna
we'll
do
know.
that.
Yeah,
But I'm just bringing it to your attention, this is not me asking,
right,
this
it's
is Sean
Sean
Wilson
Wilson.
asking, okay?
I agree, I got
So
you.
that's important to Livingston Parish. We're not talking about, parish roads, even though I look at some parish roads like Buddy Ellis, that road gotta be widened. Dr. Parrish done a great job in widening that road 5 foot, great. But that road needs to be a lateral road at some point in the future, and how you gonna widen it?
You're not gonna,
I don't
it's
see how
gonna
you
stay
can
just
do
like
it.
that.
But,
Yeah.
that's for another thought for another
Right,
day.
I agree.
But anyway, with your permission, I'd like to meet with Miss Sandy and come up with something in writing
Yeah, I
for
got
you
no
to
issue with
consider.
that. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Be all right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
That would help us immensely if y'all come up
Sure,
with what
we'll
we
do
need.
that. We'll do
Well, we
that.
appreciate it, Mr. Gerald.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your hard work.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody got any comments on that? No? All right, we're gonna go to C, submittals. Oh, you got somebody? Ms. Lee, come on up. Yeah, you might have some,
State acts in the parish to enforce something when the state requires us to get a permit from them
to put the
for
driveway.
that connection. So why can't that be part of the state's process? They know more information about what's coming and
And
what
what
they're
they need.
proposing.
Yeah,
So
I
now-
agree.
Now I've gotta
Well-
be a state permit and submit to them, and they're gonna impose regulations through the parish back on me on things that they get to review each and every time, like common driveways. We've had to do that before. We submit to the state, and that was a condition of the permit, or you don't get one.
right.
Because Lee, I'll give you an example, because typically what you're doing requires, you're having to get those permits before you sell a house, right? So you've got to get the driveways in. On minor resubs, we don't really have any regulations that does that. So if a guy puts 10 lots out there and sells them, the state cannot deny a homeowner a driveway permit. So you end up with 10 driveways.
So you
know.
go back to improvements or
Right,
non-improvements.
so I mean, it's, that situation is not really, that deal on the driveway thing is not really related to pre-engineered stuff. So we did grant somebody,
Up in your district.
and they wanted a waiver on, there was two pieces of property, there was property cut by state highway was one lot. They subdivided into two separate lots, then came in and chopped those lots up. Well, it was within the 2 years, so they asked for a waiver. We granted the waiver on chopping the lots up if they put one driveway to every 2 lots. You follow what I'm talking about? And then the state still wasn't really happy about that. But they
But again, it
understood,
wasn't
they
engineered, it
understood
was
the option of
individual
him
homes.
selling 10 lots and them having 10 driveways versus giving him a permit to have 5 driveways.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
Improvement versus non-improvement.
Right.
Right. We got it. All right, submittals. Gary?
Okay, so we talked earlier about all these,
have a copy of that.
well, this is the current ordinance as it's written.
Okay.
We talked about all these subdivisions coming in with
6
all
through
these
12,
files, you know,
yeah.
so they get, so basically, the parish says that any changes made by the ODS after approval of preliminary plat plans shall be submitted in electronic format, reviewed by the review engineer and planning director. If the change by the ODS is substantial in nature, which is defined below, then approval can only be granted by the planning commission or parish council. If the suggested change is not substantial in nature, then approval can be granted by the planning director. Substantial changes mean a change in the number of lots amounting to an increase or decrease of 5% or more on the total number of lots from the previous approved plan. Redesign of the subdivision or any portion thereof which would change the street pattern or overall layout of the previously approved plat. Relocation or addition of any sewer treatment facility, relocation or addition of any drainage facility, except as mandated by an agency with the legal authority to govern the change. So basically, you kind of take a shot at this subdivision, and as long as you don't change the number of lots by more than 5%. So if you've got 100 lot subdivision submitted, it could become a 95 or 105 lot subdivision without going back to the council or the planning commission. You can't change the street layout at all. Is that my understanding? You can't change the street layout at all. You can't add sewer, and you cannot add drainage unless the sewer district mandated the change in the drainage. So people are submitting these things ahead of time in an effort to avoid changes in the rules that possibly might or might not be coming. So my question is there a need for a 5%? I mean, why do we grant a 5% waiver on lots and say that it's not substantial? You know, can we change the number of lots in a design and not have to go back through the process? Is my question. So does anybody have any comment on why that if this change is technically not substantial, that it doesn't need to meet a new standard if it's being redesigned?
The roads couldn't be changed?
That's what it says. The ordinance says a redesign of the subdivision or any portion thereof which would change the street pattern or overall layout of previously approved plat. So basically, let's say you submitted a plat with a circle and then you wanted to go to a T-turn. I don't know if that is a substantial change or not. You know, it changes the layout, but it doesn't really change the pattern. So I don't know if that's a substantial change or not. So, you know, that would be at the jurisdiction of, I guess, the planning director to make that evaluation.
So what do we want to do here?
I mean, there was concern about the fact that because there have been so many lots submitted on particular developments through so many different filings, that there's no way, in theory, that, you know, that 10th filing is gonna be built as designed. They're concerned that the file's gonna, those subdivision folders before it's over with, gonna be pretty huge with all the changes. So there's some thought process to shrink what is a substantial change, so that there's some cost evaluation on whether you change the what, do we want to change the design? Does it make sense to change the design if it's got to be reevaluated under a new standard? So that's what the discussion's about tonight. So does anybody have any comment about
So if we get rid of, if we make it to where any change whatsoever sends it back to planning.
Well, it's not practical to make any change.
I understand, but
basically.
We could make a list of what changes would have to.
So what is substantial, what is not substantial, or, for example, we have seen guys come in and have a subdivision design, and a particular developer has a house they want to put on it, or a particular, price point they're looking for, and so they need the lots to be, 48 foot, and they're 45 foot, or they're 50 foot, and they want them to be 48 foot, so you can actually squeeze some more. So you go through and you move every lot line in the subdivision, but you only generate 3 more lots. So that's technically not substantial, because you only generated 3 more lots, possibly, depending on the number of lots in the subdivision. So the question is, we need to evaluate what is substantial and what's not substantial, so that, let's face it, everything's about the bottom line. If there's a new standard next year with respect to stormwater runoff, or street design, or retention, or whatever, and then you go to redesign a subdivision that's been previously submitted and approved, and if the substantial change has shrunk to, you change the number of lots, it's substantial, then there's gonna be evaluation as to whether you redesign that subdivision or not.
Or draw it in the first place.
Or
Yeah,
do
right,
you want
ahead
to
of time.
are you going to continue to make submittals 10 years in advance to try to avoid, changes in the law in the future? So that's what this discussion. So as a developer, does anybody have any comment about that one way or the other?
Changes are made because of.
Come on up.
Come on. You getting old too, I know.
All right, a lot of the changes are made on preliminary plats. The final plats are really impacted by the drainage impact study, because maybe they
It
have
may
to
force
make-
you to change it.
Yeah.
And we talked about, and the current ordinance allows for, if a governing body makes you change drainage, then it's not substantial. That's addressed in the current ordinance now. Basically, that for example, everybody sketches a retention pond in there. That doesn't mean that that's the size of the retention pond. It could change.
Right.
They might determine the ditches need to be bigger. So we understand that's not necessarily substantial. And it identifies in the ordinance, because it says if the entity in charge of that makes you do it, then it's not a substantial change. However, you and I have both seen subdivisions that are almost finished, and some guy, or finished, and some guy wants to sell all the lots to a particular developer, and he wants to build a particular house. They come in and move every lot line, to get the lots the size they want, and create 2 or 3 more lots in there. That is a substantial
Yeah.
change.
And most of the time, that has to come back to.
Only if it's above 5%.
But it doesn't, the rules that apply to it don't change. Meaning that the submittal comes back in, but the rules don't change.
They don't have to bring it up to the current
They don't have to bring
standard.
it to the current standard. So what we're talking about is because all these submittals have been made 10 years in advance. Let's face it. You've watched the build out of subdivision. You watch a guy submit filing 1, get his state driveway permit, then he submits filing 2 and 3 and doesn't modify his state driveway permit, so he doesn't have to go do another traffic impact study. And then by the time he builds lot 4 and 5, the 4th and 5th file, he's going out on a different highway. And so when you consider that, when you go get that permit, for that driveway, and then you do the drainage impact, the traffic impact study on both driveways, you don't need to do any improvements to the state highway. There are a lot of people that know all the shortcuts on how to get this done. And so, as we've talked about changes, they've made submittals, I've watched it. They come in here and they got, they got the next 10 filings lined out that they're making these submittals on. And in an effort to avoid changes within the rules. So the question is, if you're coming back 5 years from now and modifying your design, should you be subject to the new sets of rules?
And and I hear, it sounds like you think people will say, well, we're gonna do this because we can get away with it, but a lot of time it just happens. It's not
Yeah,
by
but
design.
right here today, it's happening because of that.
Well, I know, but you got 200 acres, and you gotta come up with a design to fit the 200 acres. You're not thinking 5 years down the road when it finally gets built, I'm gonna change it all up.
I know, you're right.
You're just trying
I
to
get
put
when
something
somebody comes
together.
to
I got you. So you're telling me some of this is because of the size of the lot? The only reason I've seen is I've seen,
Well,
a guy
the
with, I've seen a
economy,
place with
what's
200
selling,
acres. I've
what's
seen a
not
place
selling.
with 200 acres come in and make a submittal, and they got filing 1 and 2, and then there's 140 acres for future consideration. You know what I'm talking about? And they don't design it all at one time. But
and
But
now
now they are designing it all
they're
at one
designing
time.
everything
Yeah.
and making a submittal. And the only thought process behind that is because they're worried about the rules changing on them in the future.
I don't think they're worried about it. I just think they're just get it all out there.
Okay.
But
Well, we think differently then,
But a
'cause
lot
we know
of
what's
people-
happening. So,
they design, we want to sell 1 acre lots, we want real nice subdivision.
then
When he goes out there and he can't sell the lots.
right, I get
Yeah.
that.
Well, I understand.
And that's valid, and I'm sure that goes on. Yeah, and that's just
there are developers that do a lot of
Economy
market
thing.
research and come in and, there are guys that build in 1 price point subdivision. There are guys that are building 3 price point subdivisions. They're going into grabbing a piece of land and, making a connecting subdivision with 3 separate entrances or whatever, and specific price points that draw to a, broad spectrum of people. And so when they're designing those things, they're not coming back and asking you to modify them later. But there are people that just go put it on paper and submit it, and when it doesn't, when that's a miss, we're gonna come back and modify it. And so I'm just wondering, when you look at the original design, and all that's based on a set of rules, and then you come back and because a drainage impact study is a number based on, you're given so much per lot, right? On runoff, that whatever. And then you change that number, then you are impacting the results.
Yeah.
Am I correct? But it's not substantial, because as long as we don't have a 5% variance, but 5% increase in lots could, in theory, increase 5% runoff, which
outside the scope.
maybe make you a positive discharge over what, you're supposed to be net zero. So I'm just wondering, what is substantial? It was just a question.
no, I
It was
agree
a
with
question
you.
tonight
Yeah.
I knew there would be some developers here, talking about this. So I just was curious what their thought process was.
Randall, can you answer that question?
No, I can't, because I'm not
How
a
do
developer.
how do you define the substantial damage?
You can't,
But it just needs to be a
Substantial
number.
damage, yeah.
Either nothing or a percentage, like you said.
well, that's what we need to look at, Shane, is
I would agree with you 100% that there needs to be some clarity on how do you determine what's substantial damage, 10%,
Changes, yeah.
5%, that type of stuff, and not have it so gray, right? So that,
well, it's pretty black and white right now, but the way we're changing the building codes, we're getting all these submittals coming in that they would have filed for their 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and they're filing 3rd through 12,
right,
so that they think they can be grandfathered in all the way through 12, and there's no way the rules are gonna be the same when they get that far down the road 10 years from now. No way.
And nobody knows if the market's gonna be that way, or if they.
Well, and in the same side of that is,
Yeah.
what if you as a developer have to propose it all in order to acquire the land? Okay, so it's not always us
You mean showing it for a bank or some kind of
Do it
finance? Yeah,
intentionally.
yeah, I got you.
We have to get a
Oh, no.
project approved before they're gonna fund that.
Well, it's the same thing that we were saying with everybody else. Every time it's not that.
Yeah.
We understand that. So what Gary, I believe, is trying to get to is that we're trying to keep people, not from being dishonest, but from trying to keep them from going around the new changes to the building code. Essentially, that's what we need to try and figure out.
The question is, what is a substantial change?
So if we take
I mean,
substantial change out and just put.
The deal is, we understand that there, at times, there are gonna be some changes. What is a substantial change? Is what we have written in place now adequate? Or do we need to take, I mean, because basically, if, there is a list of things that is substantial. It lists 4 deals. If you fall within those 4, it's substantial and you do something. However, if you don't hit those 4 deals, then the planning director can say, oh, no, it's not substantial, and can approve the changes, and nobody knows it. The planning commission doesn't know it, the council that approved the preliminary plat doesn't know it. It's done by one person. So the question is, what is substantial? And it needs to be a pretty definitive, deal, not, if you move all the lot lines and create additional lots and shrink lots, that is substantial, in my opinion. It might fall within the 5% deal on the number of lots, but when you go impact every lot within the design of a subdivision, that's a substantial change. And we already know that if you've got to do a drainage change because the gravity drainage district told you had to do it, that whatever you have to do because of that is not substantial. I mean, it's already outlined in here. It says that if, you draw it one way
I think as long as your roads aren't changing, your watershed front to back is gonna be the same, and you're not affecting the drainage by taking a lot and going from 50 foot to 48 to add 2 more lots, or even 5 lots. I mean,
I
So that's what we're asking. We're gonna be
That
working on
water
this
is
to try and
still-
counteract the problem that we're seeing coming in, being submitted. And it's not a problem today, but let's say you design for a 1,000-acre development and you come in here with every filing, and it's gonna take you 10 years to build all this out. Well, a lot of different things change all around that development. And then you come in and you go, but no, I'm not making any major changes, so you can't make me go with the new rules that are in place that we put in because of the development around the area. And when you're talking about those little separate districts, then it makes it a little easier because then you know what watershed is in here and what little places in there. Until we get all that in place, we don't know. So that's why the question's being asked.
It was a question posed to the council by planning, seeing all these huge deals. What is substantial? Is it something that we need to look at in an effort to, what are we looking like in the future?
Well, to do a better job as a council for the parish. That's the
So
people of the parish.
that's what the question's about.
Yeah.
So I just knew there would be some people here
Yeah,
that
you
might,
guys are-
that
you
have some
guys do
skin in
this
the
all the
game
time.
that might want to
All
comment
right,
on
so
that.
is there anything else on submittals? All right, new business, you got anything, guys?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn? All right, motion to adjourn, second. Meeting adjourned.